Welcome back to This is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to talk about Commander, Tough Rules, and Cool Interactions, episode 71. Today's episode is one that I should have released ages ago, but I'm finally getting around to it. It is a question that I have heard asked in so many games, and that question is, what actually happens to stolen permanents when the player controlling them leaves the game? In a lot of games, I see players just exiling all the things that they have stolen from other players, and yes, that is oftentimes what will happen, but not always. So for this episode, I will be covering one aspect of the layers system, and that is Layer 2, the control layer. I've covered layers in the past, so for sure go check out those videos for more information on layers. It's a very complex system within Magic, but now on to some specific examples. Well, kind of. I'm going to go through a few different situations, take you through the cards and what happens with those cards, and then at the end of it all, I want for you to take a swing at it and see if you can figure out which of the situations will end up with the permanents being sent into exile, and which ones will be something different. This is going to be a lengthy episode, so if you just want the answers, then jump to the time shown in the screen right now, or use the times shown down in the video's description. Situation 1. This is actually the card that finally got me to put this video together, as my most recent game night at my local game store had a group run into this card and they were struggling to figure out what would happen. The card is Confusion in the Ranks, which is a red enchantment that says, whenever an artifact, creature, or enchantment enters the battlefield, its controller chooses target permanent another player controls that shares a card type with it. Exchange control of those permanents. One very interesting thing to note is that this card does not say the word another when referring to enchantments. So yes, this card does in fact trigger itself. So question 1, under situation 1. Let's say player A casts a Confusion in the Ranks, it enters and they swap it with an enchantment from player B. So now player B is the controller of Confusion in the Ranks, and its triggered ability. Then player C on their turn plays a Spiritmonger and exchanges it with a Balduvian Bears from player D. What will happen to the Balduvian Bears and Spiritmonger when player B, who controlled Confusion in the Ranks, is eliminated from the game? Question 2, under situation 1. Same initial setup, but now instead of player B getting eliminated, the player that controls the Confusion in the Ranks, it is player C getting eliminated, and they had control of Balduvian Bears, but they owned the Spiritmonger. What will happen to those creatures? Where will they end up? Okay, now situation 2. Player A casts Reanimate, which is a black sorcery that says, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. You lose life equal to its mana value. When they cast it, player A targets player B's Spiritmonger. When player A, who now controls Spiritmonger, loses the game, where will player B's Spiritmonger end up? On to situation 3. Player A controls a Spiritmonger, and then player B enchants it with their Confiscate. Then player B is eliminated. What will happen to player A's Spiritmonger? Where will it be sent? Next one up is situation 4. Player A attacks with their Etali, Primal Storm, which is a red creature with the triggered ability that says, whenever Etali Primal Storm attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. Then you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana cost. Players B, C, and D all had creatures exiled from their library, and player A casts all 3 of those creatures. As they're clearly the threat at the table, because Etali, player A gets ganged up on and is eliminated from the game. What happens to the 3 creatures that they had cast via Etali's triggered ability? Where will they end up? And finally, situation 5. Player A casts Turgid, God of Fright. Oh, and Just saying the name hurts me. Anyhow, Turgid is a black creature with a very fun triggered ability that says, whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. After they resolve that creature, player A casts their Smallpox, which is a black sorcery that says each player loses 1 life, discards a card, and sacrifices a creature, and then sacrifices a land. Players B, C, and D all choose to sacrifice a non-token creature, and after all is said and done, those 3 creatures end up under player A's control due to their Turgid's ability. Then, because you must always kill the player running a Turgid, everyone rightfully teams up against player A, and they are eliminated from the game. What will happen to their creatures that they took from the other 3 players? Where will they end up? Okay, those are the 5 different situations. I could easily list a whole lot more, but I think these are a pretty good variety. Feel free to pause the video if you'd like to reread the cards. Again, I have the timestamps in the video's description for you to easily jump to their respective parts of the situations and read them again if you want to. So now on to the answers, and those answers are... Only situations 2, 4, and 5 will result in the creatures being sent to exile when the controlling player is killed and the players that own those cards are still in the game. In regards to situation 1, the first question for it about the player controlling confusion in the ranks being eliminated will result in no change at all. Yes, they controlled confusion in the ranks, but that has no impact on the creatures and the control effects that were applied to them. For situation 1, question part 2, and for situation 3, however, the players controlling the creatures being eliminated from the game will not have the creatures being sent into exile as the player is leaving the game. So why is there a difference between these things? What's the difference between 2, 4, and 5, and then situations 1 and situation 3? As I said, this comes down to the control layer. You can find more information about layers in the comprehensive rules under section 613, which covers the interaction between continuous effects. So what all these situations have in common is that permanents and spells have a controller, yet not all cards have a controller. When a card is on the battlefield, it is a permanent that is controlled by 1 player. But when a card is in a player's hand, graveyard, or if it's in exile, then it currently has no controller. For more information about this, you can check CR 109.3. When a spell resolves from the stack, like a creature spell, it becomes a permanent on the battlefield. And basically a layer of control is being applied to it based on who the controller of the spell was while it was on the stack. So if I cast Spiritmonger and it resolves, then it enters the battlefield as a Spiritmonger under my control. Now, if my opponent were to cast Confiscate on my Spiritmonger, that will apply a new timestamp of control to that Spiritmonger, and control will change to the latest timestamp. Then, when my opponent who cast Confiscate is eliminated from the game, all of their cards, all of their abilities and spells on the stack, and any of their effects applying to things are removed from the game with them. So their Confiscate will be removed, but my Spiritmonger will not go into exile, and the reason for this is because the game will look at that Spiritmonger and see that there is my older timestamp of control, and then my opponent's control from an earlier timestamp with their control effect, and when that is removed, the game will now see the next most recent timestamp of control, which is mine. The Spiritmonger doesn't re-enter the battlefield, it just simply comes back to my control while still being on the battlefield. No ETB triggers or anything of that sort. This is similar to the confusion in the ranks. There is no permanent like Confiscate applying control, but an ability that has applied a continuous effect of control to those permanents. So when player C played their Spiritmonger, it initially entered the battlefield under their control, and then only after that triggered ability from Confusion in the Ranks resolved did player C apply a later timestamp of control to the Balduvine Bears, and player D apply a later timestamp of control to the Spiritmonger. So if player C is eliminated, their control layer applying to Balduvine Bears is removed from the game, and the game will now see that the latest control of that Balduvine Bears is player D. So they will get their bears back. However, the Spiritmonger they control but do not own, it will be exiled from the game along with its owner. You can check out Comprehensive Rules 800.4a for more information on this. So, why is it that in situations 2, 4, and 5, the cards do get sent into exile and not go back to the control of the owners of those cards? Why don't they just go to their owners' graveyards? Why is it specifically exile that they go to? I said earlier that players don't control their cards in their graveyard or in exile. So if we look at those three situations, we can see that situation 2 had a player reanimate a creature card directly from another player's graveyard. It skipped being on the stack and went straight to the battlefield. So there was never any initial layer of control applied to the creature by the owner of that card. In situation 4, Itali let the player cast those spells from exile. So while they were cast, they went onto the stack, but the Itali player was the one who controlled those creatures' spells while they were on the stack. So when they resolved, there was only one layer of control applied to them by the Itali player. Their owners never got their own layer of control applying to them. And then finally, in situation 5, yes, the creatures were on the battlefield under the control of their owners, but the wording on Turgid specifically says that the sacrificed creatures will then go from a graveyard onto the battlefield under the Turgid player's control. So again, they had no control in their respective graveyards, and then they went from the battlefield to the graveyard and then back to the battlefield. And now only the Turgid player has an applying layer of control to them. Okay, that was a lot to cover. I hope that it all made sense. Feel free to ask in the comments for any clarification on anything. And I'm not done yet, though. I have a bonus question for you all that have stuck around this long, so thanks to that. The bonus trick. A player controls a Confusion in the Ranks, and on your turn, you play Ancient Den, which is an artifact land that just has the activated ability to tap for a white mana. Confusion in the Ranks does say whenever an artifact enters the battlefield, so could you use this as a trick to then steal an opponent's Gaia's Cradle, which is a legendary land, not an artifact land, that says tap, add a green mana to your mana pool for each creature you control. Again, Cradle's not an artifact, nor is it a creature or an enchantment. So what's the answer? Anyhow, that's all I've got for today's episode. As always, I hope that all of you have found this video to be entertaining, at least, and I hope that a few of you maybe even learned something about the crazy rules in this great game of Magic. Have a good one. Ta-ta. Man, I really hope this stuff did make sense, because that's a lot of player A and B and C and D and control this and control that and own this and own that. I need to get better at making digital things on videos so I can make better visuals in these videos. I hope this video made sense to you guys. So yeah, I feel like there's going to be a lot of people confused. So I apologize if I have only further confused anybody. Whatever, I'm gonna stop talking now.